See here, it should be getting ready to go. Setting up our YouTube live. All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to close that. All right. Let me turn this off so I don't have background. Now I got to go to the Zoom. Done. All right, here we go. All right, hold on. All right, so here we are, new tour coach. We needed to get one in. I've been on the road. Jackson's been on the mend. First podcast we've had Jackson since the back fusion surgery. I may get one. I may need one sitting in an electric rental car outside of Midway Airport, having left a Corn Ferry event earlier today, flying up to see Andy in Chicago here at the live event tomorrow and Thursday before they get started for the last individual event. Jackson, glad to have you back. You do look better than I've seen you look, mainly because you've been resting bitch face, laying face up, and like not look cleaned up. I mean, when Connor Luke starts getting the better dressed and appearance award from you, it's time to get it going. But glad to have you back. Hopefully you're feeling better.
We're doing better. This is how bad it was for a minute there. I shaved and went and got a haircut after we put Maisie down last night and came back, and she was pissed the next day and wouldn't come around me because I looked so different. That's how
I'm
bad it
telling
was
you,
for a
it
minute
was
there.
we almost had to call Wayne in to train you on the appearance, but we didn't want to go that far. But look, we're doing some. Obviously, everybody knows. Uh, you know, we're putting out a bunch of content. We're having a blast doing it. Your Dew Sweeper Network and your Dew Sweeper Nation. One of the things we threw out there was some just some questions from teachers and players alike, and we've got a couple questions that came into you that we're going to address today. I think you and I'll do this a little more regularly, maybe every couple of weeks to hop on and do this. But and let's get your input too. So let's go ahead and let's fire away.
Yeah. First question. What are things you notice in practice or tournament play that differentiate solid amateur players and solid pro players? So, I mean, you might be able to even break that up into two questions really about what's different in practice from good AMs to pros and what's different in tournament play from good AMs to pros.
Well, uh, I think that's pretty easy on the for me, and I stress this in my teaching, and I know you've heard me talk about this, but like I think the one big difference between pros and AMs, like good AMs, but really all AMs when it comes to practice. Certainly your better AMs, and we do have some exceptions, but the pros are way more specific when it comes to what they're practicing. I think they go with a specific, and that's our job. You and I's job is to help them draft and help them come up with their practice plans. I like them to. I think the best players go with a specific task. They know what they're going to work on. I think they're very specific in what they're working on and how. I think I think tour players in particular have feels that they're trying to achieve when they're practicing. Rick Lamb and he got back to one, and I mentioned that it's good to have 3 or 4 different types of medicine to attack the same thing because different things don't work. But I think that when they go practice, they maybe cycle through those things that work for them. I can start there. And then really the primary thing, and like Luke Kerr-Deneen actually had this out. He did a post the other day on Instagram, LKD, super good follow, Golf Digest. Just the picture of the attention that Scotty Scheffler was putting his grip on when he was practicing. Like I see tour players pay a lot of attention to their posture, to their grip, those types of things, ball position. They ask questions about that. I don't see the recreational player, even the good lower handicap player, pay as much attention to it.
Yeah.
And I'll take that a step further. I think that attention to detail gets better as you go up the tour set, like as you go from mini tour to PGA Tour Americas to Corn Ferry to PGA Tour, European Tour, Live Tour, whatever it is. I think that understanding of what you need to work on and getting more specific and it more dialed down. Um, I think it gets more specific as you go up, and I think we try to spend a lot of time with our juniors on that. What are your thoughts?
I think you're spot on. And you're in Chicago going to see Andy. One of the, I pick Andy's brain all the time. Another question too, I asked him, we'll save for the end. I'll never forget, we were on the range at Old Palm for your pro camp. This might have been 2 years ago. He's hitting balls back there and likes what you guys are working on. And he stops and he leans on his 7-iron. He looks around and he says, "This just isn't golf." Right? So hitting balls on a range isn't golf for him. And Andy's always talked about understanding his pattern and what the ball's doing. Right.
Right.
And I think that's what differentiates AMs from professional players. And I heard this once from Chris Mason when I went out and shadowed him in California years ago. Wrote it down and I'll never forget.
Super good dude. We've had him on the pod.
He's awesome.
Just left National Golf Links. He's got a hell of a gig.
So he said, good players want to know where it's going when it's good. Great players want to know where it's going when it's bad and the solution.
That's good.
Which I think it kind of goes back to like Andy and understanding his pattern, right? And then how that transfers to the golf course.
And I'll say another thing too that good players do, like recreational players, even lower handicaps, they'll practice. They'll hit a shot that maybe goes too far right, okay? And like Zach Suker is a great example of this, and Andy to a certain extent on the range the other day up in Atlanta, like overcut. Whereas like a recreational player, or even a low handicap player, would be like, "Oh, that was too much cut." The tour player's like, "It's moving the right direction. I can play with that." Right? Yeah. Whereas I think that and then oftentimes guys like that would hit a shot that's 20 or 15 feet left of the target, that the recreational player would be like, "Oh, that's a pretty good shot," but it curved the opposite way of what the tour player was thinking, and they would freak out about it, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, "Well, that's still a good shot," but for them, it's not, because it's not curving the right way. And I'll tell you an interesting thing, and I meant to tell you about this before telling you this on the podcast, but sometimes we just talk better on podcasts, Jackson. But I had Ty Gingrich in town, just turned pro. Yeah. We spent a really, really cool day. We, a little bit in the studio in Mobile. We weren't able to coordinate getting down to Old Palm, my home, but and then we went out to the Preserve, which is a fantastic place. And we were talking about, like, he's hitting shots and some will go a little left, some will go a little right. And he was kind of happy with them. And go to your point, I was like, what are we doing here? Right.
Yeah.
And then, I said to him, and like, this is why I think it's great for teachers to also go on the golf course with their players. And so I went out there and watched him, and he made a bunch of good swings. And I was like, he's like, "I'm trying to hit it pretty straight at the target." And I was like, why are we not trying to hit one shape all the time? Right. And there's a young guy just starting his pro career. Right. And super good athlete, great athlete, won the Big 12s at Cincinnati. He's had ups and downs playing, but like on his process, he's moving along. Like, that was a big day for us. We talked about just starting it on a line and having everything work to one direction. And it doesn't matter to me whether it's left to right, right to left. But I think we're talking about practice, and if you were trying to help people practice, it would be to understand the shot they're trying to hit, and when they go, know what you're working on, but always trying to curve it that direction. And I'm a big believer in that. Like, I know that there are top players in the world that do have the ability to curve it both ways. I think they do that more with scoring clubs than they do with their longer clubs. I think that most tour players, if they hit it left to right, say they're a fader, they're a right-handed player, they have something in their bag that they can hit straightish that will turn over. A lot of times it's a 3-wood.
Yeah.
but they don't try to manufacture those shots just because the hole calls for it. They play their shot. DJ would be a great example of that, right?
Yeah.
So, again, I mean, we're going to your point about practicing. Um, I think that you should be more specific, know exactly what you're working on. And I think you ought to sit with your teacher or your coach or yourself or whatever, and you ought to know a shape you're trying to hit, and you ought to work on starting it on that line and having it always curve that way. I think sometimes just doing that, especially if you're a lower handicap out there, you can fix a lot of things by just getting more in tune with the shape and trying to start it online.
Yeah. That goes back to your point earlier too about professionals with their feels. I think if you
Right.
get the shot working in the same direction, those are like breadcrumbs for people to work back into the same sort of avenue with feels so that they don't get
Right.
too lost in space.
Yeah, agree.
All right. Next question. Who is the best putter you guys have ever seen, and what makes him or her great, like routines and
Oof.
things like that? Quick story. So
Yeah,
one of
you're
them's the
your
dew
alley.
sweeper. So yeah, this is right up my alley. So caddying for Adam Hadwin on the web.com tour summer
Not a
of
dew sweeper.
not a dew sweeper, summer of 2013. We're in the final group on Sunday, and I'm green. I still don't know much about anything, still don't, anyways. But we're in the final group on Sunday. We're paired with Luke Guthrie and Russell Henley.
Couple
Adam
guys, bro.
stripes it down the middle on number one, hits it to like 12, 14 feet. Both Russell and Luke are outside of him like 20, 25 feet. They both hoop it right on top of him, and we miss and make par and go to the second tee. I'm like, oh boy, welcome to the show. Little did I know Russell Henley at that point and when he made it on tour was a phenomenal putter, and obviously Luke Guthrie rolls the crap out of it as well. So those are two that stand out to me right away.
So, going with guys, if you're just saying guys we've taught, I would
I don't
say,
think it has to be taught. You can be you've ever seen was the question.
okay, so ever seen, I'm going to give a shout out to three different guys I've coached, and then we'll go from there. And they were all very, very different. I thought Smiley Kaufman, who's doing a fantastic job with his broadcast now, really had a great understanding of his process of what he needed to do, and really stuck to that process all the time about how he practiced and prepared. And I thought, that, he had stretches that he putted brilliant, right? Um, and I think Andy Ogletree his approach is different, but I think very similar. Like I think he has his process. He does the same drills all the time, uh, all of that stuff. And I mean, he's an incredible putter. Okay. And then I would say Luke Guthrie also. I think Luke Guthrie is just his stroke is pure, right? And it's just pure. Those would be the three that I've coached that have made, and I'm sure there's others. Um,
I mean, if you've seen Denny McCarthy roll in person, right? It's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
very good.
and I'd say this, like one thing I saw Jordan Spieth, he practices a lot of like, yeah, it appears to me. I know him, but I don't like, uh, uh, hang around when he's practicing, but like practices a lot of like 15, 20 footers, and watching him do those on the green and make a shit ton of them is really impressive, right? How he rolls the ball in that range, I've always thought was really, really impressive.
Another dew sweeper who I think rolled it really good, but like when things are boring and it's good and it doesn't look that pretty, but it's just really stinking good, was Sepp. I
Yeah,
think Sepp was a kind of sneaky, underrated, really good putter. And I mean, obviously, maybe shows to some of his success recently. But I mean, some of the other things that makes like obviously speaking into to Luke and Russell, who I've seen a little bit up close in person, like Russell to me when he puts is crazy free,
mm-hmm.
right? Like there's no restriction, there's no tension. Everything's kind of like loose and flowing. Where then like you go on the other end of the spectrum for that Luke, it's a little bit more connected. right? There's a little bit more like hit on it. It almost is like maybe a little bit of almost like a pulley kind of down move, but really good rolls, obviously. And Luke is super obsessed about stuff when it goes to different courses. Like we were chatting at Atlantic Beach 6 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever it was. He was talking about when he goes to Poana, how he always, whatever he reads, he's always trying to read the high line because he knows when it starts to bounce, it's losing speed. So then it catches the middle or the bottom of the hole instead of finding like the true line based on his speed. Really cool. And then he talked about, I was picking his brain about something else, and he talked about how when he plays greens that are overseeded, he thinks that's better for linear putters who are lining it up and or more aggressive who hit it with more pace. So I think like when you obviously when you get to a certain level, those things when you're changing greens, changing speeds, changing grasses, obviously those all play against
Right.
each other.
Uh, the best, it's like I've seen, like obviously recently going to live events and the team Andy's on, I've been able to watch Mickelson play a good bit of golf. Um, what's impressive to me is how good he rolls it, but how he still tinkers with grips and but the thing that impresses me and that is crazy about him is at his age, I think he's pretty close to my age, 53. Um, like his obsession to continue to learn, right? Like really undertake an aim point and checking himself and testing himself. And, then at the Open Championship play, walking some holes and hearing how he was talking about, on this putt, I might try to hook it into the hill because the wind's blowing off that way, right? Things like that, right? That like I don't know that I'd have the balls to try that at a tournament, you know. But like hearing him discuss like the fact that his brain thinks that way, and that he's still trying to figure out a way to make more putts when obviously he's made a zillion of them that can, right. I thought was, and then obviously I've been to a few Champions Tour events and watched tour events and stood on the putting green at a Champions Tour event. And my idol growing up was Crenshaw, and watching him roll 20 footers and just the speed. And to me, the thing that was beautiful about it is because it seemed artistic, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, way back he did a putting video that was phenomenal, but like I would honestly say, he may not even know what he does all the time. Watch Faxon. Brad lives at Old Palm,
Facts, yeah, that was the next one.
right? And he did a little putting clinic with us down there at Old Palm for the members. And I thought it was incredibly impressive.
Yeah,
His
very
process
good.
and what he teaches, I thought was one of the better things I've seen on putting.
That was
To be
very good. It's a tour
uh,
coach podcast as well.
it actually is. You could go back and listen to that. It was really good. Um, you know, one interesting thing about putting, I always go back to this. And I don't know why we're just off on a tangent here, but Marius Philmotter. I don't know if I ever introduced you to Marius. And I need to get him back on here. He helped invent the Sam Putt Lab. Okay, he's a German guy. Believe it or not, we did some bunch of stuff on the radio years ago, and I asked him some questions one time. I said something about he said this quote, and I wrote it down and never forgot it. I said something about, "Do you care about where they're aimed?" And he said, "All I care is that they start at where they think they're aimed."
Hmm.
Right. And I thought that was interesting because I think as you get around, I know there's all this technology out there about aiming and the stroke, and we've got all this stuff. But it would be interesting to go back and see some of these great putters. Like take a Crenshaw. I mean, was he always really aimed where he thought he was aimed? Right. I mean, those are just things that cross my mind.
Do you think that applies to full swing, the aim and start line thing?
Yes. Yeah, I think so too. I think, and I've watched some of my guys, and I've gotten less of being a stickler about aim at events and more of a stickler on it when they're with me in the off weeks.
Hmm.
I
That's good.
pay more attention to where it goes at the tournament. And like, cause I mean, to be honest, I've screwed up, uh, you know, I know I did it with Lucas one time. Like they're striping it at the target and they're aimed a little too far one direction. And you're like, and it was looking like it was borderline, and Smiley used to play his best, aimed a little right, and then it would just start working more and more right. He might be 40 yards right. And we had this conversation one time. I think it might have been up at uh, Bethpage when they had the FedEx Cup up there. And it's like, okay, we got to have some agreement to how far right can you aim, and it's okay. but I think that aim is great to pay attention to on our off weeks working, and then at a tournament, I think it's more important to be focused on where the ball's starting and finishing.
That's really good.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question based on these because we had good questions. And folks, if you're out there and you want Jackson and I to just bullshit and talk more questions, you're always available to DM us or send them here on DewsweeperTV. But who's the best chipper you've
Wilson
ever seen?
McDonald.
The only guy that we've had to have an intervention for chipping at golf camp.
The best.
And I still blame Sunkist Golf Club for causing
1,000%. I mean, best chipper. I mean, I've seen Luke Guthrie do some things around a green that are just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good question. Who comes to the forefront for you?
I'll tell you somebody that I thought was his touch was crazy good and underrated as a chipper was Bill Haas.
That's fair. I mean, his bunker play,
especially his bunker play. Like if we go short game, I thought he had a better chance at holding a bunker shot sometimes than a putt. Like I mean, it was like
dude, his bunker play was crazy,
and his approach was crazy simple. Right? You remember that? If we want it to be longer, we make it more like a U, and if we want it to be shorter, we want it to be more like a V. I still use that.
And his setup was different on every shot based on the lie and what he wanted the ball to do.
Right. Best chipper. I mean, best chippers I've seen. I mean, Smiley was a heck of a chipper. Unbelievable. Great short game. I thought.
I mean,
tell you who's an unbelievable chipper. Two people. One of them not playing golf anymore, but they room together. But Justin Thomas is beautiful to watch chip around the green to me.
Fair.
And Tom Lovelady.
Tom's got good hands.
Tom hits that open-faced, low spinner as good as anybody I've ever seen.
It's so good.
Right? Yeah.
I have to give him a shout out, but Mookie DeMoss he is a phenomenal chipper, and it's a little bit different technique than you've seen, but it's pretty stinking good.
Yeah.
It's annoyingly good. I mean, like you got to throw Phil and Spieth into the conversation, obviously.
Phil, yeah, Andy told me this the other day. They up at Greenbrier, they had an up and down contest. Okay. And they were impossible up and downs, Andy said. Like down slopes of bunkers, pin cut. Andy got 16 out of 18 up and down and lost.
What?
Phil got 18 out of 18 up and down.
No way.
Andy said that he must have made like 40 feet of putt. I mean, like he was making 8 and 9 footers because you couldn't get a club, and he's making them get 16 out of 18 up and down and lost.
Stop.
Yeah.
All right. So the question that I asked you over text, I shot off to a couple other people too, and Andy was one of them. Because I love Andy's answers. It's always really good. Anyways, question that I had was, do you think competitive golf is about performing while uncomfortable or about getting to a space where you are comfortable? Do you want me to read his answer?
I'd love to hear his answer.
Yeah, it was really good. I think everyone is wired a little different naturally. I think some people feel more uncomfortable than others. And for that person, it is about trying to be aware that you're uncomfortable and training your mind to channel it to a positive. Nerves and stress are actually beneficial to performance in the central nervous system, more athleticism, body awareness, etc. When stress and nerves cause anxiety, that's where problems occur, and every person has different ways of dealing with that. For a person that is naturally pretty comfortable, I think it's about trying to get to a place that's uncomfortable because that means something really good is happening. I don't think anyone should ever strive to be comfortable. If so, you're probably in 20th and nobody cares what you're doing anyways.
He's right.
He's right.
Yeah. Um,
He
I
said, sorry.
go ahead. No, you
So
go.
I asked him, I was like, what's it like for you personally? He said, I'm very comfortable when I understand my miss. I'm working on not being anxious when I don't understand what's going on, whether it's wrist swing, etc. Having a little more acceptance of result per shot instead pre-shot instead of post-shot.
It's pretty
Pretty
good.
good.
I think I think I answered that. I think that the I think he's spot on. I think the majority of people are they have to get good at being uncomfortable, right? And that they learn, and then kind of like what Andy was alluding to, like they learn how to play and how to accept being uncomfortable. And I think Andy mentioned acceptance in there. I know a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff I've heard Dr. Greg Carton talk about acceptance of bad shots and acceptance of what's going on. I think is a big deal. And I think it's when you don't accept it and you try to fight that you're uncomfortable is when bad shit really happens.
Mm,
I think when you try to convince yourself that you're not uncomfortable or that you're not nervous or that you're, you know, or that this, like if you're tied for the lead and going to the last round and it's an unbelievable, big a tour event, like you're lying to yourself if you say this doesn't mean more than another round,
right.
right? And I think that's where it's just another round of golf. It's just like sometimes it's not. And I think the best learn to excel when they understand that.
Yeah. I asked my coach in college that too, because huge mentor of mine, awesome player, really look up to his insight. He said it was getting to the place. He said that's why people with an ego problem or with an ego have no confidence problem. When you're comfortable, you have more confidence. And I said, how do you get to that space? He said, play competition, review each round, usually after rounds that you remember well, where you can have judgment as to something to do with this and also truth. So he gave a couple examples. He said, most likely it's because you are uncomfortable, not because a player sucks. Being comfortable or unsure with doubt, it's probably 85% of shots that can be cut to improve your score. Once you figure out why you're uncomfortable, then you put together a plan that can be a process or routine that can help with either making a decision or executing the actual swing.
Good stuff.
Yeah, really good.
These are great questions too, and I think that for the people that really want to get better, like there's so much you can do only so much you can do golf swing stuff, right? And I think that when you get to a certain point, and I just, uh, you know, uh, I was actually, believe this or not, I was reading a post on a George Gankis post, like where a guy was going off and he was saying something like Matthew Wolf's swing wouldn't work and that, and all this, and and I mean, to George's point, was there's a lot of good in there, but there's a lot of different ways to swing the golf club, right? And I think our job as coaches and teachers are to figure out the things that would hold somebody back from getting to where they're going, and not just go jump in and change things. And sometimes on people that's pretty dang hard.
Yeah.
You know, um, yeah, harder than others. So, got anything else? I mean, this has been good.
This
This
has
is
been
really
great.
good.
No, but I got to go horizontal because
All
I
right,
am starting to
Jackson's
hurt.
got to go horizontal. We just did this YouTube live, and then we also did it here. It'll be out on the Tour Coach podcast here with shortly. Our man Clint is producing this and getting it up there. But Jackson, go get horizontal. Great stuff as always. We'll do it again in a few weeks. And we're going to have a good one next week. I'm trying to catch up with Dana Dahlquist out there in Dallas. We're trying to do one, maybe do it live. So hopefully that all works out. But we always have good guests, good stuff coming. Jackson K Golf, Tony Ruggiero here. We'll be back next week. Jackson, get